Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. It's good to see you, Senator, and you and your Democratic colleagues have pointed this out, that Republican health care cuts could place more than 300 rural hospitals across the U.S. at disproportionate risk of closure, conversion, or service reductions. How much of a consideration do you think that is right now for your Republican colleagues, sort of the conversations you're having?
Well, I just gave my Republican colleagues a chance to prevent a crisis in our hospitals and in our nursing homes across our nation. And only 2 Republicans crossed the line in order to support my amendment. And it would have been an amendment which would have guaranteed that there would have been a continuation of funding into hospitals, into nursing homes, into community health centers across our country. But instead, they voted to have a $1.6 trillion cut in aid for hospitals, for nursing homes across our country. $930 billion will be cut from Medicaid. $500 billion will be cut from Medicare. $300 billion will be cut from the Affordable Care Act. And it will result in, unbelievably, 17 million Americans losing their health insurance across our country. And these hospitals that are going to be closing or in severe jeopardy are in the most rural parts of our country. The most vulnerable populations will, in fact, now be put in jeopardy. So they had a chance on my amendment just within the last hour, and only 2 crossed over. And as a result, I lost 51-49 on the Senate floor. But we'll try to give them more opportunities in the course of the day. But unfortunately, I think that Donald Trump has already given too many of them an offer they can't refuse. That they have to do what he wants.
Well, let's talk about messaging, because your party has been very, very specific with the kinds of things that you've just said. On the other hand, every budget has winners and losers. And let me give you one example. The Republican Congressman Michael McFaul, he was on Face the Nation. He made the argument that the wins in this budget outweigh the losses you talk about. Take a listen.
I'm going to vote for it for this reason. I think these numbers, it's all about waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid. What I'm voting for is a border security measure, $80 billion, $12 billion to reimburse states like mine. I'm voting for $150 billion that will go to our Department of Defense at a time when we saw with Iran is desperately needed. The world is on fire. Eastern Europe, Indo-Pacific, and then the tax cuts. I mean, if we don't extend these tax cuts, it'll be the largest tax increase in American history. For those 3 reasons, I'm a yes. I think everyone in the House, they know the peril they're in if they vote no on this thing.
So that's the exact opposite of what Democrats are claiming, and that is that if you are a Republican and you vote for this, particularly in a red state that has many of those rural hospitals, you are signing your own death warrant in Congress. He's saying the real trouble is if you vote no, because the president has the support of the American people, essentially. What do you say to what he just laid out as his argument?
Well, before the election next year, people are going to understand that the Republicans voted to increase defense spending, increase the number of nuclear weapons we need by $150 billion, gave tax breaks to billionaires in numbers that are unprecedented across our country, and got all of that money from Medicare and Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act and clean energy subsidies and food subsidies for the poorest people in our country. Do the billionaires really need that tax break? Do we really need to increase by $150 billion the Defense Department budget for nuclear weapons? I don't think so. I don't think it's a winning argument for them. I think that we are on very strong political ground because health is the first wealth. Health is the actual defense of families. It's what protects them in their communities. And what this bill is going to do is to send hospitals to the financial emergency room. They're going to be in big trouble because of this bill. And I think the Republicans are in complete denial about what the public reaction is going to be, even if Donald Trump says it's okay because the billionaires and the Defense Department get what they need.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you this question, Senator, which is you can get Republicans on the record, as you did with your amendment. And there, as you point out, there will be more of them, more opportunities for the Republicans to say what they stand for and what they stand against. But beyond that, is it really just a waiting game until the next election? What can Democrats do?
Well, that's what we're doing today, and we're going to take them into the night and into the early morning tomorrow if it is absolutely necessary. This is the beginning of the election of 2026. It begins today. This is the moment where the American people see the entirety of the Republican agenda for
the changes they want. There's a lot still up in the air, Chris, and this bill is very fluid.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you for that. Joining me now, Democratic Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner. He is a member of the Budget Committee. Senator, it is good to see you. No secret how Democrats feel about this bill. But do you see anything right now? Are you hearing anything in conversations with Republicans that suggests to you that it could be stopped from getting to the president's desk?
Well, Chris, your correspondent just laid out, I think, a very good yin and yang here. You've got the conservatives who want to even cut Medicaid more. And then you've got some of the more moderate senators like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, that want to cut it less. And one of the key amendments that I think I'll be looking at is Susan Collins is going to try to increase the amount of backstop for rural hospitals. Rural hospitals get creamed in this bill, beyond the fact that 16 million Americans lose their health care. So I'm going to watch that. There is also a tussle over the clean energy credits. Many of the Republican senators have seen that these credits are disproportionately being used in their states to build, battery factories, solar farms, wind farms, and they are getting, those states who voted for Trump are getting creamed by cutting back on those credits. So that clean energy amendment may be a key one as well.
But is there anything you've heard in conversations? Is there anything, knowing them, that would lead you to believe that a Johnson or a Scott or a Lee might be seriously considering voting no in the final round?
The Senate conservatives on the end, except for Rand Paul, they always collapse. The moderates have had a few times where they've stood up. I got to tell you, Chris, this has been some of the most heartbreaking time for me in this job because, I'm part of every bipartisan group. I know there are many of these Republican senators that know this bill is a pig. No matter how much lipstick you put on it, it's going to come back to haunt them. But their fear of Trump's retribution. Look at Thom Tillis. He finally stood up and immediately got threatened, and he's decided not to run for re-election. But at some point, the damage is going to be done. I think is more important than any of us keeping these jobs.
So I've been trying to get to the heart of this question about Republicans. If you genuinely think that this is not a bill that your constituents want, if you genuinely think either that what it does to how much money this country goes into debt is unacceptable, or you believe people may even die as a result of it, Trump's retribution is very straightforward, I understand, but do they think that they have a better chance of keeping their job, even though their constituents don't want them to vote for this?
Yeah, Chris, that'll be the question if this gets through, that the 26 elections will be won on. Now, they will make the number, oh my gosh, if they were right, if the Republicans are right, and there are literally millions of able-bodied 26-year-olds sitting in their basement playing video games rather than working, that's a discussion to have. But states like Arkansas, Georgia, New Hampshire, who have tried to put these so-called work requirements in, have ended up seeing it costs more in terms of the bureaucracy, and there just doesn't exist this, large group of people who are cheating the system. And at the end of the day, the thing that I hope people remember is that this, in a sense, if you think of a step back from a macro position, Obamacare wasn't perfect, but this would take us back to the pre-Obamacare days in terms of the number of Americans who are uninsured. Those people are still going to get sick. They're going to show up at the emergency room with uncompensated care. The hospitals are going to get that are going to get screwed the most are rural hospitals, disproportionately where Trump won. That is not good for those communities. It's already, we've seen like OBGYN services in many rural hospitals be dramatically cut back. This will accelerate that to the point that rural hospitals, I think there were an estimate of about 300 that would close.
So let me play for you the other side. So your Republican colleague, Eric Schmidt, talked about it this morning, and he says it's you guys who are misreading this situation. Take a listen.
I think the Democrats are going to try to score some cheap political points. But the truth is, their rhetoric's really tired. They got smoked in November with the same stuff, and they lost. And elections have consequences. And so today, we're going to go in there, and we're actually going to deliver for the American people so that they actually have tax relief. We're actually going to make sure we secure our border with more ICE agents, more detention beds, and we're going to make sure we've got a golden dome to defend this country. So Democrats oppose all that. That's not popular.
Safety and security is their message, along with waste, fraud, and abuse. What's your response to that?
Well, listen, I think we have seen dramatic cutbacks at the border. This actually started under Biden. And having a more secure border, I think we all want. But we've heard this waste, fraud, and abuse rant for years. At the end of the day, listen, there are always some fraud that we can do better on. But look at the waste, fraud, and abuse efforts so far under this president, the DOGE efforts. And I will make a bet with anyone that for at least the period that Elon Musk was in charge of DOGE, that effort will end up costing the taxpayer money, not saving it. And if they really wanted to enter into a negotiation about how do you actually improve performance in a number of these programs, we'd have at it. But this was about preserving the Trump tax cuts. The data is plenty in there. It disproportionately goes to the very folks at the top. Matter of fact, if you were on minimum wage in this country, you're going to see your costs go up about 53%. So this is not about ending up getting tax relief to the vast majority of Americans. It disproportionately hits folks at the top. And the other reason why Trump got hired, I think, was people wanted prices to come down.
Trump and the GOP are having a rude awakening that they've lost either way. Because if this bill fails, they lose. And if this bill succeeds, they lose. Now, they lose differently and on different timescales, but they lose. You would think, well, if the bill fails, it's good. I want this bill to fail because, as Bernie Sanders and others have noted, 50,000 people minimum are going to pass away every year as a direct result of the cuts and reforms and reverse Robin Hoods in this bill. To give the money, trillions to the rich and wealthy and well-connected, some number of poor and vulnerable people will lose their life. We're not being theoretical here. That's what's going to happen. Right? Fundamentally. And so, yes, we want this bill to fade away. But if it does, MAGA is going to tear itself apart. Because there are lots of MAGAs that want to see this bill. They just do. They want the poor to suffer. And they don't care what the collateral damage. And so if the bill fails, objectively a good thing, they'll be pissed and Trump's going to get it from his base. But here's the thing. If it succeeds, it screws him too, and it screws his party because it's objectively unpopular and it does bad things. And because it does bad things, it's going to be more hated once the bad things actually start happening instead of just being, here's what could happen if it passes. And it's going to certainly hurt moderate Republicans, quote unquote moderate Republicans, who are going to lose their seats to Democrats. But even deep red Republicans are going to go from being in the majority to being in opposition. So they lose, and Donnie included, no matter what.